Hi, I'm now going to do a demonstration of what our 6 painting techniques worksheet is going to look like. And so there's 2 different ways in which you can do this assignment, and I'm going to demonstrate both of them. And so the first and easiest way to do this assignment is to just take a lid or anything that's circular and trace it 6 times on your paper. So you can see that in pencil, I've drawn 6 circles. On your sheet, in one of the attachments, it has the 6 techniques that we're going to talk about that relates to the 6 technique PowerPoint that I gave. And so I would like you to choose 2 colors that you're going to use for this assignment, a dark color and a lighter color, or you could use 2 complementary colors. Complementary colors are located opposite the color wheel and they mix together to make browns, but next to each other, they complement. The complementary colors are blue and orange, red and green, violet and yellow. So for this assignment, I'm going to use blue and green. And so I have already done here an example of me doing base tone. So what I did is I took the 6 circles that I painted and did one simple coat of the blue. And then I labeled each one of them: underpainting, broken color, scumbling, impasto, sgraffito, and collage. So what I did is I took a piece of newspaper, I traced my lid, I put a little glue stick on the back or Elmer's glue, and I glued it down to the paper and then very lightly put a blue coating. So you can see that each one of them already have a blue coating on them and they're already dry. Now I'm going to start with my painting techniques. So whatever colors you choose your darker color and put that as a base tone down onto all of your circles. The first technique I want to talk about is underpainting. I like to use a flat brush with this. I'm going to take orange that I put in my palette and I'm going to spread out the orange on my brush. And I'm going to do what's called underpainting. So I'm going to pretend that the light is coming down over here and I'm going to make each one kind of shaded like it's a sphere. I don't know if you've done this before in a drawing class in which you're taking the shading and you're going in a curved line going around your painting and you're painting on top of the blue. And you'll notice that the orange is definitely not showing up as much because it has the underpainting of the blue on there. And so as you look a little bit more closely, you can see that I'm adding the orange on top of the blue. I might add a little bit of white to my orange so that it stands up a little bit more on the camera. Oh, that shows up quite a bit. And I'm going in a circular motion and I'm going to create a dark to light version of that orange using curved brush strokes. And I want to show the underneath of the blue. And so I'm going to take my paper towel, I'm going to wipe it a little bit, and I'm going to try to create a little more of blended brush strokes. I'm going to show you this a little bit more when we do our first painting, but I'm now using the white as a little bit of a highlight that I'm going to blend in with small brush strokes, but I'm showing the blue through. And so underpainting with the blue, you can still see a good amount of blue all the way around. Underpainting is when you paint on top of something, still showing the color through. The next one is broken color. This is really common with Impressionist painting. I'm now getting some more paint on my brush, and I'm going to now switch to a rounded brush. I like to use rounded brushes with broken color, but you can use any, whether it's flat or round, but not too big. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do that same technique, But instead of blending, I put down paint and pick it up every time. And so I'm creating a series of dots and dashes, similar to Starry Night, similar to the way that Monet did his water lilies. This is not blended. This is kind of speckled, or as they say, the color is broken, and it's broken into dots and dashes. You may put the dots and dashes a little bit closer together where you want it to have more saturated color, and a little bit further apart when you want more of the underpainting to shine through. So broken color is a style that the Impressionists used and is not about blending. It's about creating a series of dabs and dashes to create that sense of shimmering light that goes around the way that light reflects on objects, almost like that speckled light on a river, that when the moon shines or the sun shines on the ocean. And so this is broken color. The next one is called scumbling. I'm going to go back to my flat brush, but I'm going to wipe it off, because another example of scumbling is called dry brush. And dry brush is when you actually put your brush flat and it's holding it sideways, not a lot of paint. It's kind of dry. Notice how I'm holding my brush on its side, and I'm not holding it like a pencil. I'm holding it on its side and I'm dragging the paint. I'm going to drag the paint across and show some of the texture. It's similar to underpainting, but it's more of a dragging, and it shows a little bit of the texture to it. And so scumbling works really well when you're trying to do a little bit of a shadow area and you want to show the texture of the canvas, the texture of the paper, and even a little bit of the texture of your impasto that we're going to talk about in a minute. And so notice I'm not applying a lot of paint. It's kind of a dragging textural experience. Impasto is really fun because we need to use a palette knife. Palette knives come in all different shapes and sizes. And if you don't have a palette knife, you might be able to use part of a credit card that you cut. You could maybe use a plastic knife if you have handy. Don't worry about always having the fancy items. You can always use what you have on hand. So if you want to cut a piece of plastic to a flat shape, that would work. With impasto, thick paint. We're almost like doing the Bob Ross thing, in which we're going to apply it like it's frosting. And notice how I'm putting my palette knife on the side. I'm applying it in a thick textural aspect, and then you can always scumble on top of this later, but try to hold it as parallel as you can to the side of the paper, and this will apply the paint in a thick, very textural way. This is really beautiful when you're trying to do plaster, to do trees, to add thickness to the water, or anything you're trying to do. Using impasto is definitely a desired effect to really show that beautiful brush strokes that you can get with a palette knife. Next is a sgraffito. You want to scrape off or wipe off your palette knife so that it's nice and clean for this. You could use a back of your paintbrush. You could use an X-Acto knife, a fork, any sharp tip will do sgraffito. So sgraffito is if you put down the paint as regular and you're filling over the blue areas with a nice amount of our complement, which is the orange, and we're going to fill that in. But now we want to add some texture or some lines. This works really well with patterns on fabric, bark of a tree, however you want to create a little bit of texture. Once you apply the paint to the canvas, you have to work quickly because the bottom paint has to be dry, but the top paint has to be wet. I take my palette knife, and by scraping away, I am revealing the beautiful blue lines underneath my circle. And so I can create contour lines around my sphere by scraping in the pattern of the lines. And so you can really see how Sgraffito is that scraping away of the lines, which could also be done with the impasto or any of the wet paint. It only works when your top layer is wet and your bottom layer is dry. Once the paint starts to dry, you won't be able to scrape off any of the top layer any longer. And then lastly is collage. Collage is really nice because you can cover up a lot of it, cover up a little bit of it, cover up as much as you would want. And so using a piece of newspaper or another type of sheet music, a page of a book, you can have a little bit of the paint shining through and a little bit of the newspaper or whatever shining through, but you kind of want to add that second layer of paint. And so you kind of have it shining through, but not as much. And these are all painting techniques used by the great masters of the 20th century. They first underpainted, they used broken color, they dry brushed, they used a palette knife, they scratched away with Sgraffito, and they collaged material down before painting on top of it. Another way that you could do this assignment is that if you choose not to do it on a blank piece of paper with circles, you could create your own. So what I did is I just took an old painting that I had and I covered it with newspaper and I spread an underpainting of blue down on there. And now I can go with my other techniques. I can create more of an abstract painting by using a variety of colors. You don't have to use just complementary colors. You can use any colors you want, and maybe you can create a spiral through broken color by using your brush and just create a little bit more of an abstraction. So you don't necessarily have to do it in a series of circles. You can create your own painting. By now I have collage down there. I have underpainting with a little bit of the blue. I'm going to hold my brush on its side. I might do a little bit of scumbling or dry brush on it to create a little bit more of this texture that I see on the newspaper. I can then go with my palette knife. I have a little bit of black over here. I might want to add some good amount of paint with my palette knife and show how that technique comes to play. It would be nice if you did it on like a scrap piece, one that isn't like a huge masterpiece. I'm then going to go back and maybe like scratch some lines into my abstraction to show that I know how to do Sgraffito. Maybe add a little bit more paint with my palette knife to show some nice bit of impasto. So I have broken color, I have impasto, I have dry brush, I have underpainting, I have collage, and I have Sgraffito. And so if you were to do more of an abstraction version of this, just try to show me in the comments what your goal is with that. Or you could do a realistic painting and try to simulate some of these. We are going to be using these with our paintings, but I just want you the freedom to like not have to stay within the shapes if you don't want to. You could do an expressive one, or you could go back and do one that's kind of more regular that has each one of them labeled. I hope you enjoy your practice. This is just like a little mini assignment to kind of get us going. And then our next assignment will be a full-fledged official painting. Enjoy.